Okay, so we're ready to start the meeting in 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you today from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Shanantan nations. Pursuant to the order of reference of April 20th, 2020, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. During this meeting, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. As you are speaking, if you are planning to alternate from one language to another, you will need to also switch the interpretation channel so it aligns with the language that you are speaking, and you may want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. That's the icon in the middle bottom of the screen, which on mine now says English. Unfortunately, it has an American flag, but we'll change that. So that's the one that you will click on to the language that you're speaking. And if you want to change, if you're going to change to French, then change the origin language there. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar while you are speaking. And when you release the bar, your mic will mute itself, just like a walkie-talkie button. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raise hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak. In order to do so, you should click on Participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click Raise Hand. All right, so that's on the Participants button, Raise Hand. When you're speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of headsets, as we've discovered, is strongly encouraged. If you have earbuds with a microphone, you should hold the microphone nearer to your mouth when you are speaking to boost the sound quality for the interpreters. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation, or if you are accidentally disconnected, please advise the chair or clerk immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. So before we get started, can everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner, which goes to the gallery view. With this view, you should be able to see all the participants in a grid. This will ensure that all video participants can see one another. During the meeting, we will also follow the same rules that usually apply and to our normal meetings. And once again, we have witnesses in 2 hours, but I'm going to ask the clerk to make a comment before we start. In view of the fact that it's now 2:23, will we have an absolute deadline at the end of the meeting? Can you give us an indication, Madam Clerk, of how the timing will work today in view of the delay with the technology?
Maybe while we're receiving the statements by the ministers, I can double check with our technical teams and see if we would have more time.
That would be great. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. We have with us today the Honorable Carolyn Bennett, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, the Honorable Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services, and the Honorable Dan Van Dal, Minister of Northern Affairs. And Minister Miller, my information is that you will begin this round. So please go ahead and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Kwe Tanse Ulukut, bonjour. Good afternoon, bonjour. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm here very close to Canada's Parliament, and I wanted to note that it is on unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to join all of you here virtually alongside my colleagues, again virtually, Bennett and Van Dal. With me as well, and here to answer your questions from Indigenous Services Canada are Jean-François Tremblay, my Deputy Minister, Valerie Guinean, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister for First Nations and Inuit Health Branch, Dr. Tom Wong, Chief Medical Officer of Public Health for FNIB, Mary Capellis, Assistant DM for Education and Social Development Programs, and Chris Duchesne, Director General Lands and Economic Development Sector. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank the committee for this opportunity to provide an update on how our government's been working with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders, Indigenous organizations and communities, as well as provincial and territorial governments to mitigate the threat posed by the global pandemic of COVID-19. As of April 30th, we've seen 131 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in First Nations communities on reserve. We're also tracking one confirmed case in Pond Inlet, Nunavut. Afin d'aider les communautés autochtones à se préparer.
In order to support First Nations in preparing for and responding to COVID-19, the government established a funding envelope of $470 million of federal responsibility, including for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis community public health needs. And till now, there has been use to procure supplies and nursing services, as well as preparedness measures led by the communities. This is in addition to the amounts made in the budget of 2019, where we had put aside almost $80 million for health issues. And this allowed us to establish regional coordinators and strengthen the capacities of First Nations dealing with health emergencies and pandemics. The Indigenous Services Canada is providing PPE and disinfectant and sanitizers to give them to First Nations communities in health emergencies. This stockpile is accessible to First Nations communities who might require access to personal protective equipment to ensure the safety of healthcare workers and others supporting the delivery of health services in the time of a health emergency such as COVID-19. To date, we have provided communities with 167,850 gowns and 202,000 surgical masks and 500,000 vinyl gloves. This complements supplies provided by provinces and territories, and this is tremendously important to note that this is a work of collaboration. We're continuing to respond quickly to requests and to assess them within a 24-hour turnaround time.
Many communities and service providers are adapting their operations to respect the requirements for physical distancing. National Indigenous organizations such as Thunderbird Partnership Foundation and First Peoples Wellness Center have developed a series of resources related to COVID-19 that are available online. One of our supports has been to financially assist the First Peoples Wellness Circle in developing an online platform for its network of local multidisciplinary mental wellness teams that are currently offering services to 344 communities. Also, working with the provider, we've increased the number of crisis intervention counselors on shift at the Hope for Wellness helpline, which is now receiving more than 100 calls and chats a week linked to COVID-19. This experience of self-isolation and physical distancing of having family members who may be at higher risk or fall ill can have significant and real impact on mental health. We recognize this and are engaged with partners to support solutions to address and bolster mental health, particularly for youth. Supporting Indigenous youth is another key area of our focus. The department is working with Indigenous partners, including youth organizations, to support and promote Indigenous resources for youth. For example, We Matter is an Indigenous-led youth organization focused on life promotion and messages of hope and resilience. And they've developed toolkits which are available for youth teachers and support workers to help youth and those who support youth. Similarly, Canadian Roots Exchange has set up a Creation Community Support Fund to support youth mental wellness during the COVID-19 pandemic with local solutions. Members of this committee may recall that on March 18th, the Government of Canada allocated $305 million towards a new distinctions-based Indigenous Community Support Fund to address immediate needs related to COVID-19 in Indigenous communities and amongst urban Indigenous populations. This funding is part of the COVID-19 Economic Response Plan and is in addition to needs-based support for First Nations and Inuit health and emergency management.
We recognize that Indigenous post-secondary students are facing unique challenges as a result of COVID-19. The Prime Minister announced on April 22nd nearly $9 billion in funding for post-secondary students and recent graduates, including Indigenous students. That said, we know that certain Indigenous students are dealing with unique situations, whether it's relation to their employment stability or the ability to pursue their studies. That's why an amount of $75.2 million in funding will be specifically allocated for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation post-secondary students while they're dealing with COVID-19. This funding is over and above the base funding each Indigenous distinctions-based program receives to support post-secondary studies, and this might be used to buy a computer, equipment, as courses move online, allow for summer course enrollment, cover expenses related to meeting basic needs, including food, child support, housing, and transportation, and cover an additional academic year and associated expenses. Ultimately, this additional funding is meant to ensure that Indigenous post-secondary students are able to continue or start their studies as planned, despite barriers posed by COVID-19.
We're also taking steps to support Indigenous-owned businesses during this crisis. The Government of Canada will provide up to $306.8 million in funding to help small and medium-sized Indigenous businesses through the network of Aboriginal financial institutions that offer financing to Indigenous businesses. This measure will help an estimated 6,000 Indigenous-owned businesses endure this difficult time and will hopefully provide the stability that they need to persist. Indigenous businesses, including Indigenous government-owned corporation and partnerships, are also now eligible to apply for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to support them in their efforts to retain and rehire laid-off employees and weather the current challenges. Taxable Indigenous government-owned corporations are already eligible for the wage subsidy. We've adjusted the eligibility for the wage subsidy to include Indigenous government-owned corporations and partnerships to support them to retain employees who are still on the payroll and to rehire workers previously laid off. And I know this is important to committee members because it's been raised from a number of you, and I appreciate the advocacy. Your advocacy made a difference. The government has also established a business credit availability program to provide $40 billion in additional support through the Business Development Bank of Canada and Export Development Canada, who are working together with private sector lenders to coordinate credit solutions for individual businesses with some Indigenous businesses may be able to leverage. This is important. Finally, I'd like to bring attention to the positive progress we have seen in terms of our support for First Nations, Indigenous peoples off reserve and in the urban Indigenous populations generally. We recently concluded a proposal-based process to distribute $15 million to organizations that provide critical services to First Nations off reserve and Indigenous peoples living in urban centers. This funding is part of the government's Indigenous Community Support Fund that I referred to earlier. To date, 94 proposals have been supported through the Indigenous Community Support Fund, and this includes support for friendship centers as they continue their important work to serve urban Indigenous communities in the face of this pandemic. And again, thank you for the advocacy of members on this committee that pushed so hard. We know that friendship centers, for example, are playing a crucial role, with their key support ranging from delivering food to families, young people, and elders, responding to calls for assistance and support, or providing crucial mental health and cultural support for urban Indigenous community members. As a response to COVID-19 pandemic continues and adapts to new data, we ask Indigenous communities and partners to continue to assess their evolving needs. And we ask them to reach out to their regional departmental contacts so that we may assist them in supporting community members. At the same time, we continue to focus on longer-term goals such as housing, employment, and ending drinking water advisories. Nous sommes déterminés.
We are determined to respond to the evolving needs of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities and individuals, and to step in to support based on the requests of Indigenous communities. That is why, for example, the Canadian Rangers are currently helping with food distribution, supplies, and medical assistance, not only in Nunavik, but also in northern Saskatchewan, northern Ontario, and in the northern Quebec. The Canadian Armed Forces and their Rangers detachments have a great experience in assisting Indigenous communities and Canadians. We have seen Rangers and Canadian Armed Forces members stand up and step up where Canadians need it most. In our long-term care facilities, in areas with acute resource needs, and in remote areas of the country. That is why we continue to work together to improve access to essential services for Indigenous peoples.
Today, our thoughts and prayers go to the military personnel who lost their lives earlier this week in the helicopter crash in the Ionian Sea, as well as their families. Canada is grieving with them as well, as we all try to come to grips with this tragic incident. Let me conclude by saying that the government has designed and supported a series of measures to provide timely and direct support to all Canadians and peoples of Canada in response to this crisis. These measures will help us to meet the needs of Canadian households and to ensure that Canadians can pay for essentials like housing and groceries during this difficult time. Further, these measures offer timely financial support to Indigenous peoples in Canada, no matter where we reside. On another note, I want to thank in particular the members of this committee who have reached out either directly to me or to parliamentary secretaries or to my staff to advocate for the continued health response to a health problem. This is not a partisan issue, and I want to thank you for parking that and moving towards ensuring that we have a health response to a health problem, because at the end of the day, we are talking about the lives of Canadians, Indigenous peoples living in Canada, and that is precisely the measure of which we will all be judged as we tackle this epidemic that we are all confronted with on a daily basis. I want to thank everyone on this committee who has reached out, talked to my PSs, and done amazing work to advocate for the people reaching out to them. We are making a number of measures and putting them forward in record time. Obviously, mistakes are made. When you point them out, we do our best to adjust. I want to thank you all for that, and I want to highlight the nonpartisan nature of the outreach and highlight your characters as humans in having done that, and I appreciate that deeply. My staff appreciates it, and indeed, I believe everyone on the committee appreciates it. Again, working together, we can save lives and we can flatten the curve. Miigwech, Nakumik, thank you. Merci. Marcicho.
Thanks very much, Minister Miller. And we'll continue on now.
Can I call a point of order there, Chair?
I'm sorry. Please.
Has there been a time established for each speaker? This is it's a very important discussion, and I'm sure we're all eager to get to our questions. So it would be just great to have clarification on that.
Yes,
thank you.
Thanks very much. Our speaking allocation allotment went to about 10 minutes, which was roughly the case for Minister Miller, and then shorter interventions from Minister Bennett and Van Dal for the reasons that you just stated. So we have a 5-minute intervention now with the Honorable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is an honor to appear virtually before this committee, this time on this important study on COVID-19 in Indigenous communities. And while the House of Commons is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people, I'm joining you today from my constituency in Toronto on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, where we honor all of the Indigenous peoples who paddled these waters and whose moccasins walked these lands. And I would like to recognize the traditional territories from which all of you are participating today. Our officials, Daniel Watson and Ross Patty and Jeff Moore will be on the next panel and supporting us. But I too, like Minister Miller, want to thank our parliamentary secretaries who meet with us every morning at 9:15, and Pam and Gary and Yvonne. This has been extraordinary work as we spread out all of the work, but also the important suggestions that you've all brought to us. We know that from the beginning of the threat of this pandemic, even all Canadians were concerned that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit would be disproportionately affected by COVID-19. We know the long-standing social and economic inequalities and inequities mean that Indigenous communities are more vulnerable to COVID-19, and the impact of an outbreak in Indigenous communities would be greater. We continue to be impressed with the impressive record response of communities who, since H1N1, have worked hard to develop their pandemic plans and now have been able to execute their plans and been able to keep their community safe. Our hearts are with those whose communities have lost a loved one, and particularly the Namgis First Nation, who recently lost a beloved elder. Our primary focus has been to ensure that we all work in partnership with Indigenous communities, as we know they are the best placed to act on the needs of their members so that they can ensure that everyone is safe and healthy. We're seeing community-driven solutions that are working. We are very proud to have been able to support the initiative Dene Regional Chief Yakalaya in the Northwest Territories, as the families chose to return to the land as a way to protect themselves from the virus and promote healing and mental health. Strong leadership and strong collaboration and coordination across the board is how we've been addressing this pandemic. Indigenous leaders have demonstrated their tremendous resilience, innovation, and leadership, and they must continue to be involved in decision-making at all levels to ensure that the supports of the Government of Canada provide address the COVID-19, meet the real needs in their communities. We have also worked with the First Nations Financial Management Board, the First Nations Tax Commission, the First Nations Finance Authority, and a broad range of Indigenous organizations. We are developing who really are developing the measures that they need to support communities. Protecting women and children from domestic violence during this pandemic has also been an important issue that needed to be addressed. And so we invested an additional $10 million to support shelters and First Nations communities during this pandemic. And I'm working with Minister Monsef and her provincial and territorial partners to further the work on the shadow pandemic of violence against women and the need to address the calls for justice addressing missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, two-spirited LGBTQIA. COVID-19 underlines the importance of reflecting on the difference between the medical model in which I was trained and the medicine wheel. It is time to reflect on achieving more health, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, so that we reduce the burden on our healthcare systems. That's what flattening the curve means. The knowledge keepers and healers focused on the well-being of all in a very holistic way. It's time that we listen to them. Tommy Douglas had stated that the goal of Medicare would be to keep people well, not just patch them up when they get sick. And that's what the pandemic is teaching us as we stay home, wash our hands, and physically distance. Flattening the curve means reducing the number of those that get sick so that we can stay within the capacity of our beloved and cherished health care system. It's the difference between more health, so we need less health care. So COVID-19 has finally convinced all Canadians that health promotion and disease prevention must be our priority. I'm just going to switch here. Merci pour tout ce que vous.
Thank you all for all you are doing in your communities as you set the example of coming together for the collective action on COVID-19 while we remain apart. I look forward to your questions and any advice you may have. We are indeed stronger together. Miigwech, Marcy, Nakumik, thank you, merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. And now our final speaker in this round is the Honorable Dan Vandel, Minister of Northern Affairs. Minister Vandel.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairperson, and everyone on this line for this important meeting. It's a great pleasure for me to appear before the committee today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Canada's Parliament is on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people, and I am speaking to you from my office in St. Boniface, St. Vital, which is in the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as Treaty 1 territory. Today, I'd like to give you an update on the situation of COVID-19 in the North. Since the beginning of the crisis, I have been in regular contact with territorial partners, premiers, and First Nation and Inuit and Métis partners across the North. I know that the only way we have any hope of preventing the spread of COVID-19 in the North is by taking an approach informed by Northerners. They have the ideas, the innovations, and the solutions we need to implement to prevent and stop the spread of the virus. We are committed to listening and doing everything we can to support territorial governments in preventing and responding to COVID. Territorial governments have done a tremendous job in protecting their communities and keeping people safe, and I support their efforts and continue to work with them throughout this pandemic. Canada is directly addressing these unique territorial needs with more than $130 million of funding towards 4 key priorities. Number 1, health and social services. Number 2, essential airline services. The third would be supporting businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. And the fourth is ensuring access to adequate nutrition and essential goods. To support health and social services, the Government of Canada has provided $72.6 million to the territories, which builds on the $500 million in funding to provinces and territories through the initial Canada Health Transfer. And it is helping territories to address the critical priorities that they have identified to minimize the spread of COVID-19. It is helping territories to put in place solid measures in order to prepare and respond to COVID-19. To support essential airline services, which are a critical link in maintaining the supply chain for the movement of essential goods, services, medicines to the North, Canada is providing an initial investment covering a 3-month period of up to $17.3 million amongst the territories. Let me make this switch here. Cet investissement.
This investment, along with the investments by the territorial governments, will help northern air carriers to maintain a basic network of routes and services. This will be vital to ensure that people living in remove and flying communities have continued access to food, medical supplies, and other essential goods and services. So they're only accessible through air service. Like in the rest of Canada, many businesses in the North are already struggling with the economic impacts of COVID-19. To assist businesses with operating costs not already covered by other Government of Canada measures, the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency will provide $15 million in non-repayable support for territorial businesses through the Northern Business Relief Fund. The fund will provide individual businesses with up to $100,000 in non-repayable funding to help with their operating costs.
Continues to evolve. Excuse me. As the COVID crisis continues to evolve, we also recognize the increased costs of many essential goods in the North and the increased financial pressures that families are facing. And that's why we are providing an additional one-time investment of $25 million to Nutrition North Canada to increase the federal subsidy rate for essential items such as nutritious food and personal hygiene products. This makes these essentials more affordable for Northern families, including Indigenous families in the North, during these very challenging times. We've also, as you know, implemented the Harvester Support Grant, which has been allocated to Indigenous partners, and we are working diligently to flow the next wave of money very quickly. This grant, which was co-developed with Indigenous partners, helps Northerners return to traditional harvesting and food sharing practices by alleviating the high costs associated with traditional hunting and harvesting of foods. Furthermore, we've announced a distinctions-based funding of $45 million through the $305 million Indigenous Community Support Fund for Inuit design and implement community-based solutions to prepare for and react to the spread of COVID-19 within their communities. The Government of Canada is committed to supporting the health, the safety, and the well-being of Northerners through the COVID-19 crisis and beyond to ensure that they are able to recover and thrive in the future. And that means that we will keep listening carefully to and working closely with our territorial partners, our provincial partners, Indigenous partners, and others to determine the best responses and approaches in our ongoing efforts to fight COVID-19. Miigwech, merci, narkumik, thank you, merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're now going to our round of questions, and our first round will be 6 minutes. The speakers in order will be Vidal, Van Couverden, Berube, and Kakak. And Mr. Vidal, you are up first for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ministers for all appearing here today. I know you're very busy in the midst of all of the challenges we're facing. Minister Miller, according to CTV News yesterday, Northern Saskatchewan has become the most concerning outbreak of COVID-19 in Indigenous communities in Canada. There have been 2 deaths of elders in a care facility so far, and the spread has been dramatic and rapid. Many active cases now are in neighboring First Nations communities. And there was a positive test of a worker at the Beauval Gas and Grocery Store, which, for anybody that understands the area, that Beauval Gas and Grocery Store is the hub of everybody moving around in Northwest Saskatchewan. So, you know, the fear is real. Minister, beyond my role as critic of your file, even beyond my role as a member of Parliament, this is very personal for me as this is my hometown, this is my area. The families, the kids, these are all kids and families that I coached in hockey. These are all friends and direct connections. So this has become very personal for me suddenly. And I guess my challenge is that it's too late for reactive measures. Now's the time for major proactive response from ISC in Northern Saskatchewan. This has become a very dangerous situation for all of us in Northern Saskatchewan. So my question is actually quite simple. What actions are being taken today to provide the capacity to proactively respond to this crisis? I'm thinking down the lines of health personnel. I'm thinking PPE. I'm thinking testing and tracing. And I'm also, you know, thinking even military. We have a military base that's within a couple hours of this crisis. So if you could just clarify for us what's being done today on the ground.
Yes, and look, and thank you, Gary, for the passion in that question, and it is something that I am worried about as well, and indeed all Canadians should be. I am going to spend very little time speaking in general terms. This is very important, and I think you deserve specific answers. I will pass it over to Tom Wong to to speak to the specific actions that we are placing. You should know that ever since we've gotten news of this outbreak, we've been engaging with the government of Saskatchewan, working in particular with the Northern Intertribal Health Authority and the Saskatchewan Health Authority to ensure that our responses are not only appropriate, but coordinated. And you may have heard recently of some of the surge support that we've provided in terms of getting PPE into the community. There's a lot of active work being done on contact tracing, making sure that communications are heightened so people are isolated and that we are controlling something that could become precisely as you describe it. So on that, Chair, I would ask that either Valerie Gideon or Tom Wong speak a couple minutes about what those specific actions are that are taking place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are working actively with the Public Health Agency of Canada, as well as the Indigenous communities, both off reserve and on reserve, together with the local public health department, the province. Of course, off reserve, it is the lead is the province, but on reserve, it's the lead is us, Indigenous Services Canada. As an example, we are mobilizing testing capacity into the area. The area needs point of care testing so that testing can be done rapidly. As a matter of fact, as we speak, the Public Health Agency of Canada working with us and the province are moving in rapid point of care testing equipment into the area so that point of care testing can be done there. In addition to that, as Minister Miller said, we have made arrangements for PPEs to be moved into the area as well. We've been asked to provide surge capacity, including health professionals into the area, nursing. With that, our staff in the region, we have a network of medical officers as well as coordinators for health emergencies as well as nursing. We are fully behind the communities in providing those support, including public health measures such as isolation, such as physical distancing, such as contact tracing. Thank you. And maybe I'll turn over to Valerie.
You know what? Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Wong. I would like to get one more question, and my time is going to be short, so I'm going to move on to a new question, please. Minister, I thank you for your announcement about the support for the First Nations businesses and the through the limited partnerships through the SUS program. That's something that, like you said, we've been advocating for, and I appreciate that as something has come to fruition. We are hearing about the $306 million you talked about today for Indigenous small businesses, and we're hearing concerns that we're still waiting for the PMO to sign off on that program, and we're also hearing that this funding is still weeks away and that the actual flow of money is still somewhat down the road. Minister, actions speak louder than announcements, and the lack of detail and swiftness of action following these announcements is creating uncertainty and anxiety for many Indigenous businesses. Can you just simply identify for me when the money is going to be available to these AFIs through NACA on this program?
Look, thank you, Gary. Speed has been perhaps one of the most important factors in a lot of the decision-making processes that have compressed into literally hours, what does take sometimes weeks. And I know as an experienced member of Parliament, you've seen how quickly things have moved. Again, this package was approved in record time, working with NACA, the 59 AFIs that have identified the needs, have the established client network to establish a series of partially forgivable and partially interest-free loans for small businesses, medium small businesses that are Indigenous in nature. That is critical, and we expect that to be deployed within the coming weeks. It isn't a question of being jammed up at a particular instance of government. It's just a question of being able to deploy the funds, assuring those companies that they do have the backing, financial backing of the government of Canada. And we know how pressing that need is, and we are moving at a speed that is pretty remarkable for any government to get things out. To give you that reasonable expectation, we believe that it could be a question of a couple weeks, but again, we'd have to revert to the institutions that are providing those and within their network of well-established contacts to deploy those money. Again, I'd note that the CERB is available and the wage support is available, and the clarification with respect to Indigenous proponents is also out there. So that is also one of the options available in addition to the specific supports.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Mr. Riddell. We go on to the next 6-minute round with Mr. Van Couverden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And before I start, I'd just like to thank everybody in the department, all of the hard work. Can you hear? All of the hard work being done to quickly get to solutions on this has been remarkable. The speed at which you've moved has been commendable, and I just want to thank you on behalf of me and my community. My staff are grateful. I understand that in addition to the emergency supports available to all Canadians, the government will provide incremental support for Indigenous people and Indigenous organizations in urban areas. Indigenous people living in urban centres on or off reserve require special supports in order to allow them to prepare for and react to the spread of COVID-19. Mr. Miller, Minister Miller, could you please provide an explanation on how the $15 million for regional, urban, and off-reserve Indigenous communities and groups across the country, and how was the eligibility process developed, given that it was very, very quickly? Did it take into consideration the vast, diverse nature of the commitments and the communities and the flexibility required in order to deliver these services in such an expedient nature?
And thank you, Adam. And this is an important question. And first, I want to take a second to recognize the important work for off-reserve Indigenous organizations and local community organizations across the country that are supporting Indigenous peoples most often in an urban context, most often some of the most vulnerable. And this is a compounding factor in someone's susceptibility to getting COVID-19. It's why on March 18th that our government announced the funding through the COVID-19 economic response plan that included a $50 million fund channeled through the Indigenous Community Support Fund. This was the most expedient way to address a crying need that exists throughout Canada that frankly, at any level of government, has gone fully satisfied and fully funded. We streamlined, and Adam, this is important, the application process to about a week period, asking community members or community organizations to submit what their requirements. There was a screen of criteria that my team mobilized to look through a lens of specifically focusing on a health response to the health problem to assess quickly a number of the crying needs that exist. I will confess to members that of the 94 organizations that were selected, there were many multiple more with very, very good applications that would be worthy of funding. We had $15 million at the outset to disperse, and I will say at the outset that this is not enough. Some great examples include the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association that requested and was recommended for over $200,000. The Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre that requested significant amounts of money and was accorded as much, $87,000. The Tahegan-Kaska Tlingit Three Nations Society that was awarded $22,000. These are all examples of organizations doing incredible work for vulnerable populations that aren't necessarily entirely served by their home communities, and that is something that we recognized. Again, these are service providers, so the network that we have with them in terms of governance is a bit different than if you were awarding or distributing funds to communities on the basis that we typically do. So there was a process of request and response. Again, we are working hard to deploy additional funds. And let me say this is a whole of government approach. So the network of shelters that we have funded through the wage support, 40 million for shelters, a great number of which serve Indigenous peoples, and a number of the Reaching Home for Homelessness initiatives that we've deployed, over $157 million, do serve Indigenous peoples. They are just not specific to Indigenous peoples. Again, I will acknowledge that is not enough, and we are working more to serve these peoples in very vulnerable situations, and that's work that we will continue to do. And frankly, it's the result of advocacy like people like you and other members of this panel that have brought this to fruition in such a short time.
Thank you very much. And if I could ask you or any of your colleagues to elaborate a little bit on
could I have a point of order? I don't know, am I the only one who's getting really internet problems? I'm losing half of it. My connection was totally lost. Is it only me or is it everybody?
Fine.
Mine's fine.
I'll continue if that's okay.
Sounds
Sorry.
like, go ahead, Adam. It sounds like Marcus is having his own personal technical problem. Just please.
Sorry for any difficulties you might be having. I'm curious to know if you could elaborate, or if any of your colleagues could elaborate on the flexibility that will be accorded with these funds. I think it's really, really important that that the money that is going out the door reaches these organizations in a tangibly flexible manner, so that they can help people without being sort of hamstrung by any constraints, restraints, or red tape associated with the funding.
The answer, Adam, is yes. We are, part of the challenge we've had in getting the money out is we're working with currently existing parameters that may have more restrictive components to them. So we've worked to expand the terms of conditions as a policy framework within our department, and indeed that's being done at repetition across government. The answer is yes. There are always parameters to, particularly to request-based funding, but we have worked extremely hard to enlarge them to make sure that there is flexibility to adapt that culturally responsive approach to COVID-19.
Thank
you very much, Mr. Minister, and I conclude my questions there.
Thanks very much. Right on time, Adam, and that moves us to Madame Berube. 6 minutes. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all. I'm very happy to be part of this committee virtually today. So my question is for Ms. Bennett, the Minister. The Quebec government has a plan to release a lockdown in certain regions that will start at the beginning of May. And according to the concern that we have in Indigenous communities in my riding and elsewhere throughout Quebec, do you have a plan that will allow the protection of Indigenous communities once these measures of lockdown are loosened?
Madame Berube, c'est plus.
Ms. Berube, I think it would be better for Mr. Miller to answer to you. Yes, I'm more than happy to do so. As a Minister for Indigenous Services and MP for the downtown Montreal. So these are issues that are tremendously important for me. As you know, that in downtown Montreal, we can see the awful situation within the long-term healthcare facilities. And this makes me very emotional when I see all the elderly dying, and those are the people who built Canada. And so I think that this is what we have to think about long-term, but we also have to look at the use of the Canadian Armed Forces in the short term, but we need to have a long-term reflection as to this situation in long-term care facilities. But when we talk about the commitment of the Quebec government to give a certain flexibility for Indigenous communities to decide themselves when they will send back their children to school. But that being said, that the question that I have as a human being is how we can ask Indigenous communities to do that we in the non-Indigenous communities don't do. And this is something that has been going on for centuries. But when we look at the supports, they must be adapted for Indigenous communities in all provinces or territories that decide to deconfine people by basing ourselves on health advice. And when we talk about the supports for Indigenous communities and their local economies, and we also have to ensure that we provide medical support because they are particularly vulnerable because of historical reasons that you know very well. So this is of concern for me and should be of concern for all Canadians. But of course, we're not out of the woods yet. In terms of flattening the curve, we have to ensure that people are following the strict medical and health guidelines. And of course, there will be the issue of talking about deconfinement or releasing the lockdown, but that will be discussed. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. I'm going to continue my exchange with you. You know that more than half of Indigenous people live in urban communities, and only 50% of the supports are provided to them. And so looking at the needs of Indigenous communities living in urban areas, do you expect that there's going to be more monies distributed to Indigenous communities? What can you do in that regard, Mr. Minister? First of all, that's a very relevant question, and I'd like to underscore the amount that I talked about earlier on. That's $15 million for urban initiatives, 94 in community organizations that are serving Indigenous communities in the urban community, and also the Going Home initiative for the homeless, and the initiative for shelters for women. So this has to be done in collaboration with municipalities and with the provinces and with the federal government. I'll say at the outset that the amounts that we've allocated were not sufficient at the outset, but what we wanted to do was to act as quickly as possible within the existing structure, at the same time giving a certain amount of flexibility. So the amount that was allocated in the friendship centers networks throughout Canada was done very quickly, thanks to the traditional funding that we provide. And through other institutions that 2 weeks ago, they asked for applications, and we received more requests than we counted on. But we're trying to deal with all those requests that are very relevant, and they're more important for institutions in the downtown core of Montreal that serve vulnerable Indigenous communities. There are several Inuit in my riding and in the riding of Minister Garneau, and this is important for us as Canadians and as members of Parliament and as human beings. And so this is a work that we're going to continue on. It's not going to stop overnight, regardless the confinement measures that are implemented, because we're not out of the woods until we have a vaccine.
That's that time. And now we go on to another 6-minute intervention. Ms. Kakak, you have 6 minutes. Please go ahead. Once again, our next intervention is from the NDP. And Ms. Kakak, I have you as our next speaker.
I can't hear, Chair.
Chair, I can't hear her. I think she might be muted.
Sorry, my screen was saying I was muted and or unmuted, and my headset was saying I was muted. So apologies with that. For clerk and chair and the rest of the committee, I'll be splitting my time with my colleague Leah Gazan. So this first hour during this hour's round of questions will be myself, and then in the second hour with the second hour witnesses will be my colleague Leah Gazan. With my questions, I will be specifically speaking to and asking about my riding, Nunavut and Inuit in Nunavut. The government of Nunavut to date has spent $24 million in direct relation to the response of COVID-19. The government of Nunavut had requested $42 million from the federal government. Of that, $30.8 million was approved. The territory has not seen this funding yet. Can each minister just give me a simple in progress, a date to be determined, or if you have a date for when the territory can expect to see that $30.8 million come through?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And first of all, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the absolutely essential work that the territorial governments and the government of Nunavut have been doing in response to COVID-19 and the leadership of Premier Savigatag. Since the beginning of this evolving situation, I have been working in close collaboration with the Premier and some senior ministers from the government of Nunavut to ensure the safety and the security of the residents of Nunavut. And we remain committed to supporting the territorial governments in their response to COVID-19. We understand there are some unique circumstances in Nunavut, the remoteness, the quality of infrastructure, and simply the higher cost of living of doing business. That's why.
Apologies, Mr. Vandal. I have multiple questions. I'm just looking for an in progress or a specific date to see the $30.8 million funding to the territory. Thank you.
It's for sure. It's the dollars are committed and it's in progress. And as far as more where it's at in the administration, I could have one of the public servants speak to it.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Daniel Watson.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, just very briefly, it's very much in progress. We're in more or less
That's great.
constant
That's what
conversation.
Minister Vandal said, and I got my answer. So thank you so much. If I may move on. So there was an announcement made on April 14th, as Minister Vandal had mentioned, from the federal government of $25 million to see to contribute to the Nutrition North program to see that we make nutritious foods more affordable, and that's in a quote. So in an article that was released today by Nunatsiaq News, the Northwest Company has said, and quote, many basics are well in stock, like Kraft Dinner, Click, eggs, lard, and tea. This article was published today. Minister Vandal, would you agree that the items I just listed should be considered basic items?
Having consumed a lot of Kraft Dinner and Click when I was younger, I know they're not very nutritious, and Nutrition North should be subsidizing more nutritious food than that.
Thank you, Minister Vandal. That leads me into my next bit. We talk a lot about being healthy, being able to access healthy foods, being able to keep ourselves and our homes clean. And these are things that we're seeing a lot more, especially with COVID-19, this global pandemic that we're all facing. Now, we still haven't seen the $30.8 million as promised to the territory. We have had our first case confirmed as of yesterday in Pond Inlet, Nunavut. And from what I understand, this community has been looking for assistance from anyone really in their water issues and the challenges that they're already facing. So in order to access water, they need to drive out onto the ice with their water truck. They drill a hole, they chlorinate the water by hand, and then they test it to make sure it's okay, go and distribute it through the community. Now, this can't go on much longer because of the spring melt, and the trucks won't be able to drive onto the ice for much longer. They have been asking for assistance since October, and now we are in a global pandemic. How can we expect people to keep safe, tell them to wash their hands, to keep things clean, and stay home and take care of their children when we already see this crisis going on in the community, and we've added, there is now a global pandemic layered onto it. What is the plan for Pond Inlet directly in relation to COVID-19 and the challenges that they're seeing with the infrastructure to be able to deliver water throughout the community?
At time, so please finish with the answer now, Minister.
Yes, I can tell you that I've been working very closely with the Premier on the COVID crisis. We communicated this morning. It's true, Nunavut has confirmed a case in Pond Inlet. The government of Nunavut are doing have responded accordingly. A response is actively underway. Nunavut's rapid response team is in Pond Inlet now to provide care, conduct contact tracing, and ensure the community has the necessary supports in place to deal with this. The Premier assures me that the Pond Inlet Health Center is well staffed and well prepared. And I can only quote the Premier in his press release yesterday that said there is no need to panic. Nunavut has had time to prepare, and we are in a solid position to manage this. We ask people not to place any blame, not to shame, and to support communities and support each other as we overcome COVID-19 in Nunavut.
Minister, thank you for your comments. Thanks all to our questioners. And we're going to suspend our meeting briefly now to organize the next series of witnesses from the departments. So just a brief couple of moments out, and then we shall return. And once again, thank you to our ministers Bennett, Miller, and Vandal for joining us. And the department staff is next. Brief suspension. So everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner and ensure they are on gallery view. I better do that too. There. And with this view, you should be able to see all participants on the grid. And if someone's just joining us now, before speaking, please wait till I recognize you by name. When you're ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar while you're speaking. That works very well too, like a walkie-talkie switch. If speaking in English, ensure you are on the English channel. If speaking in French, please ensure you are on the French channel. And so you'll have to toggle back and forth if you're changing in midstream. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Please speak slowly and clearly. And when not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. And so welcome to our witnesses. From the Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, we have Daniel Watson, the Deputy Minister. We have Jeff Moore, the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy and Strategic Direction Sector. Serge Baudouin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Northern Affairs. Ross Paty, Assistant Deputy Minister, Implementation Sector. And from the Department of Indigenous Services, Valerie Gideon, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, First Nations and Inuit Health Branch. Mary Louisa Capellas, Assistant Deputy Minister, Education, Social Development Programs and Partnership Sector, and Dr. Tom Wong, Chief Medical Officer and Director General, Office of Population and Public Health. We'll now proceed with our usual round of questions from members. Unless, are we okay to go ahead with questions, Madam Clerk, or are we going to have briefs from the department?
We do not have any briefs.
Okay, we'll go right ahead.
However, we do have Mr. Schmale and Mr. Viersen that have raised their hands.
Yes, so Mr. Schmale, I saw you first. Please, what's your intervention?
Oh, perfect, Chair. I just wanted to let you and the members of the committee know that at 4 o'clock, the Conservative members do have to excuse themselves for another meeting. So I'm glad there's no briefs. We can go right to questions, but I just want to let you know.
Thank you very much. Is that the same, Mr. Viersen?
Yeah, I was just going to say I have the meeting has to end at 2 or 4, depending where you're at, because we got another meeting.
6-minute question round starts with Mr. Schmale. Go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. I was going to ask this to the minister, but since we ran out of time, I'll ask people within the department. We've been hearing some disturbing news coming out of the Wet'suwet'en territory, very concerning statements from the Wet'suwet'en elected chiefs that was released last night, raising alarms about the MOU reached between hereditary chiefs, the province, and the federal government. Now, I think everyone understood that after the agreement was drafted, the Wet'suwet'en people would have the opportunity for full and informed engagement on the document. Unfortunately, this hasn't happened, and the Wet'suwet'en elected chiefs have asked, due to COVID-19, that this be put on hold until the inclusion of the people of the Wet'suwet'en can be safely included in this important dialogue. Now, again, I put this to the department. Since we're here to talk about COVID-19 and the government's response to it, maybe is there anyone in the department that can at least relieve the fears of the Wet'suwet'en people and confirm that the department, the government will not move forward on this until the Wet'suwet'en people and elected leaders have had a chance to ratify and safely discuss the impact of this document has on their lives and their community, and hopefully someone might be able to provide comment on that.
Please.
Mr. Chair, yes, thank you very much for the question. This marks the 33rd anniversary this coming week of the launching of the Delgamuukw trial, and that obviously is a very important one for the Wet'suwet'en people. One of the things that has never been concluded between Canada, British Columbia, and the Wet'suwet'en is how to ensure that the proper conversations happen within that nation. And one of the things that will absolutely happen as a part of this process is that we will conclude how best to have the Wet'suwet'en Nation have its wishes and will expressed fully and completely in relation to the implementation of any of its rights. The process of engaging others is one that we have been involved with in many other negotiations across the country. It would be very similar. The standards that have been set by the courts and the expectations for everybody around the durability of those agreements relies exactly on what you're pointing out. And I can assure you that that will happen over time, and that the implementation and conversations about any substantive issues there will very much require the full consent of the nation.
Mr. Chair, just a message from the interpretation team. If it'd be possible for Mr. Watson to hold the microphone closer to his mouth when he speaks. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's go.
Okay, to Mr. Watson, thank you, Chair. Again, I just wanted to confirm that last time we met, the minister had traveled to British Columbia. She had met with some of the hereditary chiefs, not all, and none of the elected members. Has the department, or that you're aware of, any of the minister's staff reached out to the elected officials to talk about this agreement?
Yes, in fact, shortly after that meeting, we did have a meeting with one of the chiefs, and the minister is on the record as being willing to travel to the area and to meet with elected chiefs as well. Obviously, she's willing and happy to talk to any chief in the country, very much so, and we will, again, during the upcoming negotiations that flow from this, ensure that one of the topics is precisely that question: how to ensure that the full nation is engaged and involved.
Okay, I've allowed that for obvious reasons, but could we return to the COVID mandated approach to our meeting? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Schmale.
Sure. I think this is where it's relevant, is the fact that this, according to news reports that have come out, and according to the chiefs that have released a statement, their fear is that the government is moving forward on this during a crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. I just need to assure these elected chiefs that there is a proper process in place. So that's where the link is. I think I guess my
I think just to reiterate, I think the purpose of the meeting today and these meetings is to speak in relation to COVID-19 directly. I think while the nature of the questions that Mr. Schmale is putting forward is important, but I think for the purpose of this meeting, it's not relevant, and I would invite any conversations on this, I think, to be deferred to a later time when we discuss matters including the Wet'suwet'en deal that was made yesterday, the ratification that was made yesterday.
So could you proceed under that direction? And we have about less than 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Sure. I guess, again, to the department, I guess recently there was a list of organizations to meet with the minister regarding COVID-19 planning and consultations, organizations that were not actively consulted early in the process. Can we confirm that the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples were consulted?
We have had, Mr. Chair, we've had conversations with the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. I believe I have a meeting scheduled with them shortly on this front, and there have been conversations. Yes, I'm always careful when I use the term consultations, because the Indigenous groups themselves often want to be sure that we're not meeting it in the sense of having implied consent or others, but certainly conversations have gone on.
How about the Native Women's Association?
We've had a number of ongoing conversations with the Native Women's Association on a number of topics. I can't promise at this point in time that the specific issue of COVID-19 was the original subject of the agendas of those conversations, but we talked to them on many issues on an ongoing basis.
That's our time on that first 6-minute intervention. And now we go to Mr. Batiste. Mr. Batiste.
Okay, well, I just want to thank the staff and the ministers for their work over the last few weeks. I know that I've heard from chiefs across Canada, and majority have been satisfied with how our government has been proactive in keeping First Nations communities safe during this pandemic and ensuring that the programs are also including them. One of my questions, and Dr. Gideon, you can talk to about mental health and the mental health of the issues of Indigenous people, on reserve is overwhelming during normal periods. But during COVID-19, there is a significant increase in despair, anxiety, and depression on reserve. To illustrate, I'd like to bring up 2 issues, the first being my discussions with the Native Women's Association President Lorraine Whitman, who talked about the vulnerability of women who are in toxic relationships, who feel trapped in self-isolation, where otherwise they'd be able to go out and get that support. So my question is, what are we doing to support Indigenous women during this difficult time? And the other one is a little bit more closer to home, and I'm going to ask it, and I know I've spoke to the ministers about this, but I was very saddened out of New Brunswick, where a young man, Brady Francis, was tragically killed in a hit-and-run accident years ago, but unfortunately the man that stood trial was acquitted. Now, I don't want to talk about the case, this isn't the time for that, but one of the things I really have to share is the kind of outcry from First Nations youth across Canada during this time. And I have to read what's being tweeted in Facebook and on social media, where it states, "I am fully and completely aware that I can be killed and there will be no consequences and repercussions because I'm First Nations in Canada. Let that sink in a bit. This is a message being shared and received by First Nations youth in our country during these already difficult times. And this is not an isolated incident. It's been brought up many other times, but especially now during this COVID era, you know, what are we able to do to help those mental health? You know, we've seen many inquiries and commissions that have spoke to this issue, but my question is, how can we involve and inspire First Nations youth instead of having despair to have a sense of hope where they can be the change that we need to see by being judges, lawyers, police officers, and what steps can we take to help additional support on mental health for the youth during this difficult time, and letting the government know that, you know, letting people know that our government is listening so that this despair gives way to hope, reconciliation, and justice. Lalio, thank you.
Mr. Watson, and would you be aware of your mics? Apparently translation is still getting a bit of a muffled sound, so please go ahead with your response.
Okay, and I think my colleague, Deputy Minister Tremblay, will have more to add, but I'll start on that, and I won't start with as direct a response as maybe my colleague will, just given the nature of the mandate of my department. I think that one of the things that's important here is that we've gone out of our way in this conversation to deal with Indigenous governments as governments. In the past, we would simply have spoken to provinces and territories and maybe local health authorities. We've gone out of our way to make sure that part of the conversations were with the modern treaty governments and have been with other Indigenous representative organizations as well. That's in a world where obviously we're focusing very tightly who we're able to talk to simply because of time and the nature of the emergency. That isn't a direct answer in a specific way maybe to your question, but I do think that it's important with Indigenous youth see how the rest of Canada's governments are looking at how their Indigenous governments are treated, that is at least one part of the solution, and obviously the ongoing consultations that we're doing where we're hearing what people are identifying as important. And with that, perhaps I'll leave my colleague, Deputy Tremblay, to speak to some of the more specific programmatic things they may be doing.
Thank you, Danielle. Mr. Chair, I think this is a very important questions, and I don't think there's an easy answer to this. I think Danielle touched to a long-term solution to this issue. But in the meantime, what I can tell you is in this, with COVID as a crisis, as you know, we spend probably around $450 or $125 million per year in services that are related to mental health. Those services are essential services, so we keep and we continue to deliver those services. We develop also information that is available and that we made available and we are sending to all the networks to make sure people know that those services continue to be available. That include, of course, also Jordan Principle that continue to be, we continue to respond to demands on Jordan Principle. Child Family Services is also considered as, you know, an essential services. We made even adjustment to the criteria to make sure that they will not be impacted negatively as much as possible by COVID. So we've done everything we could to make sure that the services that are there for mental health will keep and continue to be there. But there would be a need for more. There would be a need for adjustment of those services. I think it was mentioned before. It's the same thing for the general population, but most significantly for vulnerable population. The isolations have an impact on people, and we are looking at working with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis on how we can make sure that the services and the response will be there to support people who will, clearly some of them would be affected from a mental health perspective in the context of this pandemic.
Thanks for your comments, and that's the end of that 6-minute round. We go next to Madame Bérubé. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît, vous avez la parole.
You have 6 minutes. Ms. Bérubé? Thank you. My message is from the Minister Miller. You said in a press conference that Aboriginal communities would need more financial support. What are the next steps? And more precisely, do you know how much more will be given? And for what measures particularly? And can you tell us, if you can tell us today, when you will be able to tell us? Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, rather, as the Minister is not here, I will try to answer the question. Yes, financial support for communities is important. How much money will be needed? It would be presumptuous on my part to try to tell you how much. We are in a situation which is unprecedented. So what we try to do is try to address the needs. The minister tried to or did mention the needs in urban centers, and we tried to address that demand. We receive demands every day from First Nation communities, from Aboriginal communities, and we try to address them directly as we receive them, whether it's for protective equipment or for anything else. We try to use the program that we have for emergency management, which is very flexible. We use it for crisis management, and we are using it right now in the COVID context to ensure that the resources are provided where the needs are greater, but it is true that we will need more resources, and we will readjust our measures as the crisis develops. Thank you. I'll continue with you, Mr. Tremblay. In Nunavik, there are 16 cases confirmed and 1 in Nunavut. Does your department do a follow-up of cases observed in Inuit and Métis community and in people living outside of reserves, in order to ensure in order to stop the propagation? I will ask Dr. Wong to answer you.
Oui, merci de votre question.
Thank you for your question. I will start by saying that by describing our department's program, and then I will hand it over to Valerie Gideon, who will complete my answer, give you more detail. For Nunavut, we have no public health doctor within our department for Nunavut, or health officer. But to support Nunavut, we work with the Canadian Public Health Agency and with the community and with the health department, the Health Ministry of Nunavut. And for Nunavik, we work in cooperation with the communities and the corporation, the Nunavik Corporation, and the Quebec government. But for a lot of services, the health transfer already supports these services. Perhaps Valerie Gideon could give you more detail. Very quickly, yes. Nunavik is a part of the provincial system. They're a provincial responsibility. And it's the same situation for the Inuit living in the territories in Nunavut and in Labrador. They do their own follow-up because they are their own government. They have their own government. And for health, public health, rather, they work with the provincial government. As far as the Métis are concerned, and the Aboriginal people living outside of reserves, they are a provincial responsibility. What we do is ensure a presence at the consultation table, the federal provincial territorial table, and we work with our experts in public health, and we work in coordination with within a pan-Canadian coordination in that area. Thank you. If I may continue.
That's the 6-minute time.
No.
So we go on to, I believe, Ms. Gazan, were you going to share with Ms. Kakako? Please go ahead.
Yes,
you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, Indigenous people comprise approximately 5% of the Canadian population. If we look at the overall projected spending so far for COVID-19, it appears that only approximately 0.01% of all funds allocated to date are specific to Indigenous people. And this is my question, is that given how COVID has further compromised the safety of Indigenous communities as a result of ongoing human rights violations, I'm wondering why the departments chose to continue to underfund Indigenous communities at a time where it's clear that more is needed, and that it's very clear that these decisions were not based on needs. If somebody could answer that, perhaps somebody from Mr. Miller's department. Thank you.
I can start, yeah. I think you have to take into account that, first of all, the $84 billion or whatever the amount of money is now for the support to all Canadians is for all Canadians, including First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. Everybody have access to the benefits, individual benefits, and should have access. And we should encourage First Nation, Inuit, and Métis to make sure that they have and they access it. The same thing for the students for the PSC, for example. So the funding that we're receiving is not due. It's not supposed to be the allocation for the percentage of the population for First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. It's supposed to be funding in addition to actually target those populations to address where we think and where we perceive and where we know that there's needs and gaps, and also where we have specific responsibility.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Mr. Chair, however, I appreciate his response. However, the Public Health Agency of Canada has identified several factors that make people more vulnerable during COVID-19, and this includes things like economic barriers, social or geographic isolation, insecure and adequate or non-existing housing conditions, noting significant health inequalities and inequities, as noted as well from Dr. Tam, between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. Minister Bennett also acknowledged that today in her statement. So in light of these facts, again, my question is, why did the departments choose to disregard evidence from Health Canada and continue to underfund First Nations, given the light that they're already behind in terms of just human rights needs that other Canadians enjoy?
Since the beginning of the crisis, Mr. Chair, since the beginning of the crisis, the minister, as well as the employees of the department, have recognized this issue. We know that the social determinants of health are particularly alarming sometimes in the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We know that a pandemic may have and could have an impact that is quite significant in those communities because they are a vulnerable population. We don't measure our actions necessarily at funding. And I will just turn to my colleague, Valérie, who can explain to you the kind of actions that we have been taking at all levels, at the local, at the regional, and national level.
Very quickly, I'll just say that we don't have a fixed funding envelope at the moment when it comes to providing additional public health supports to First Nations communities in particular. We are receiving requests on a continuous basis from communities across the country for what they require to ensure that they're activating their pandemic plans and that they have the surge capacity required. We're filling personal protective equipment requests on a daily basis, 7 days a week, and we are continuing to put in temporary health infrastructure supports, whether that's retooling of community infrastructure or whether or not it's procuring mobile medical units or temporary accommodation facilities. Yeah. So we are spending as communities have identified those needs that they cannot address within their existing funding allocations or the community support fund.
Yes, I thank you again, Mr. Speaker, for that. And I think Mr. Miller noted that several communities have asked for funding and did not receive it. He also noted that the funding is inadequate. But my final question, Mr. Speaker, is that since COVID-19, and I think I'm belaboring the point, but we've witnessed, and it's certainly shone a very clear light on the abhorrent failure of government to ensure human rights for all Canadians, and specifically Indigenous peoples. We cannot go back to business as usual. And I'm wondering if the departments can inform the committee how they will ensure immediate actions. Unfortunately, should we experience a pandemic in the future, that we will not have another crisis that resulted as a result of a failure for governments to honor the rights and dignity of all Canadians. Like one example that I can share is the Liberal government has promised all boiled water advisories to end by 2021. We are 7 months away from the target. Shouldn't this pandemic be an opportunity to address that immediately?
Just to begin on this, I think you're right. There's this crisis show us that the long social determinants of health that are due to historical reason that needs to be addressed have to be addressed. It kind of confirmed that the investment made over the last few years are important and should continue in terms of addressing housing, addressing water issues, and addressing all those elements that are related to the social determinants of health. And that's, I think, what we need to continue to do. And we hope parliaments would be helpful on this. On this issue of water and infrastructure, you have to also understand that it is something we have to look at. We want to continue with all those long-term advisories and making sure they're going to be removed as soon as possible. But we also have to respect the fact that a lot of those communities are in isolation at this moment.
Thank you very much. Time is, we're at our time. Sorry
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
We have, I believe, Bob Zimmer and Arnold Viersen were going to share their time. Then, do I understand, Bob, that you'll have to leave the meeting for 4 o'clock?
Yeah, I think we still have 10 minutes according to my clock, though, so we'll have to get it done as soon as we can.
Okay, so you're up. The next 5-minute round is up, and you'll start and share with Mr. Viersen.
Sure, I'll be brief. I just was in communication with a former or sort of a Chief Teresa Tate-Day from the Wet'suwet'en, and also Chief Maureen Lugie, who is an elected chief of the Wet'suwet'en. They both are extremely concerned. There's a letter that I just received yesterday. The elected chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en nations have not agreed to, nor have they given their support to sign a proposed memorandum of understanding on rights and title with Canada or British Columbia. And I think the troubling part of this, and I respect the Gary that's trying to speak into this, but with respect to him, I think it's shameful that the minister would try and sign something at a time when the pandemic has limited person-to-person
I'm going to have to intervene. We had this conversation earlier. We're mandated to do COVID. This is not a completely other topic, but any topic can be nuanced into the main one. So if you've got something directly on the COVID crisis,
I would like a response why the minister would implement or go through with a memorandum of understanding.
That's not part of this discussion today. Do you have a question that relates to COVID?
Well, with respect, with respect, yeah.
Point of order, go ahead.
It's my understanding, Chair, that it's not the job of the Chair to censor the questions. It's Mr. Zimmer's time. He has his full 5 minutes to say whatever he absolutely wants to. It's his turn.
Well, that's
no one's had an objection from the other side. It's not the job of the Chair. It's my understanding to make these.
It is the job of the Chair. It is.
I brought forward a point of order, and I think this is Mr. Bratkina is responding to that. The issue here is that the scope of the study that we were undertaking is limited to COVID-19 and the government's response to it. There are a lot of issues that this committee ought to be seized with, and we should be discussing, including the issues that have been brought forward by Mr. Schmale and Mr. Zimmer. But this is not the appropriate study or the time to do that, and we would be glad to entertain those at a later date. But at this moment, what's important is that we continue the discussion limited to COVID, and I think that's what I'm asking members and the chair to make sure that these conversations are limited to COVID-19.
But this is going on during the COVID. This pandemic is happening, and these elected chiefs are trying to speak up.
Well, Mr. Schmale,
I'll speak to the point of order if I could.
Go ahead.
I think this is exactly a COVID issue because it's brought up at a time that COVID has limited interactions between a person-person contact within the Wet'suwet'en people and the ministry. And yet the ministry is trying to slide this under the door and get it done without consultation from the Wet'suwet'en people. I was texted yesterday with urgency from Teresa Tate Day, as we all know, a chief that is very concerned about our community. And then also the elected chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en has brought this concern to me with desperation that this has been again slid under the door, under the watch, and this is going ahead without their approval. And if this isn't something that's COVID related, it is exactly COVID related, and the government shouldn't be doing this during this time.
So, first of all, the response to Mr. Schmale's comment is that the chair is in control of the agenda. If there is a disagreement with, and chairs make rulings. I was the mayor of the city of Hamilton. This comes up often in council meetings where people take the matter in a different direction. If my suggestion or my ruling is not permitted, and then you can challenge the chair, and we'll vote on it around to see whether or not my ruling stands. But we've already used up a very valuable time, and I'm not sure that the COVID crisis, in terms of the potential loss of life and destruction of the economy, is what we were asked to do when we came forward with our next with this series of committee meetings. So I'm going to stand by that comment that I made. Do you have any other questions or comments that relate outside of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs issue? And if you do, please go ahead.
I would pass the rest of my time to Mr. Viersen.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I too have a question. The Sucker Creek First Nation in my community has suffered a loss due to COVID. A drift pile has got their first case. Many of the First Nations in my region have been under total lockdown, and now I'm getting reports that even getting food into there has been a bit of a challenge, particularly North Tall Creek. And so I just wanted to put that on the radar of the department officials. Mr. Speaker, given the fact that this COVID is going on and that we're all seized with it and overwhelmed with the COVID response, I would say, particularly in my office, I think it's disgusting that today the Liberal government is doing a firearms announcement. This is outrageous, but I guess I have two questions around that. Has there been a First Nation response or consultation? And is there any Indigenous exemptions that are coming with this firearms announcement today?
Response? Can't hear.
Sorry, point of order, Chair.
Go ahead. What's your point of order?
I fail to see how this has anything to do with the government's response to COVID-19 as well. Similar to the previous question, there's lots of issues that could have conversations other places, but the firearms legislation isn't part of the government response to COVID-19.
It definitely seems to be, Mr. Speaker, as the government spent most of the day this morning making this announcement. So I'd ask Mr. Watson if he knows if there's any Indigenous exemptions and have First Nations been consulted on this.
Point of order. Mr. Chair? Sorry, I can't hear you, Mr. Chair.
What is your point of order?
You know, we have critical issues to discuss around COVID-19, life and death matters. And, you know, I think we need to use the time that we're all committing.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why it's disgusting that the Liberal government chose today to make this announcement.
And I would argue, excuse me, it's my point of order that you know, my respected colleagues are not respecting the discussion that we all agreed upon here.
And I would agree with that as chair, and I would ask Mr. Viersen if you have another question. I'm not going to entertain a response to that question for the reasons stated.
I guess the other question would be have the Métis settlements of Alberta been consulted at all, and have you been reaching out to them around the response to COVID-19?
And Mr. Chair, perhaps I could turn to my colleague Jeff Moore, who has engaged in many conversations with Métis across the country.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed, we've had a number of conversations with the Métis settlements in Alberta in a few contexts. One context is within the $305 million program that was initiated to support communities. So with that portion of funding, we actually provided funding to the Métis Nation, but there's also money apparently that's being provided through the $15 million proposal-driven fund, which is a component of the $305 million. And I think the officials from Indigenous Services Canada can probably speak more to that. But I think from a governance perspective, et cetera, we've been having ongoing conversations with them about some of their preoccupations with the pandemic and how they're moving forward as a set of communities.
Okay, we're at time at that point, and we'll go to our final questioner on the first round, which is Ms. Kazan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. However, I was splitting my time with Mumilak. I don't know whether but I'll ask maybe the final question. In terms of, I heard a question or Jean-Francois indicate, or I think it was Dr. Wong, that Nunavut does not have their own public health doctor. I find this concerning in light of the fact that they've just found their first case of COVID and they are not being provided with the same support. I see that you're smiling, Dr. Wong, but one case in our communities is not a laughing matter. Particularly in Nunavut, where they're having a serious housing crisis. So I'm asking, does your department have plans to immediately get the proper resources in Nunavut that could or could not result in a lost lives?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Just want to clarify, my comment earlier. I was referring to that our department, Indigenous Services, doesn't have a medical officer there in Nunavut. And the reason being is that all of the health services, including public health services, it's transferred to the Nunavut government in Nunavut. So Nunavut government has a chief medical officer as well as the entire team of health professionals. I was just simply referring to the fact that our department does not have a medical officer there. The services are provided for, very importantly, by the Nunavut government and the Nunavut Health Department, who's doing a fantastic job in supporting the communities, including prevention and control, isolation, as well as preventing the spread of this disease. I hope I answer your question.
Yes, thanks very much. I don't know if Mumilak would like to add on to that. Sorry, Mumilak.
Mutton and Leah. Chair, can you just give me a time, the time I have left?
You have 3 minutes left.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chair. So we saw a lot of discussion. I'm going to turn more to financial assistance for individuals, specifically, again, to Nunavummiut and Inuit in my writing. When we talk about small businesses, we're talking about these different kinds of funding assistance opportunities that are coming through. What we're seeing is a lot of people fall through a lot of different gaps, and not everybody necessarily has the information that is needed in order to apply for things like the emergency response benefit. So in my case and in my writing, there are I have so many artists and artisans that are completely out of work for the upcoming months. I'm talking about performers, musicians, carvers, jewelers. All of these people have been stripped significantly of their work and being able to
make money to be able to provide for themselves and families. So for individuals like this, what is the plan that the federal government has to assist individuals that might not necessarily have the documentation, might not necessarily have the resources to say they've made X amount and they need the assistance from CERB? What is being done to make it more accessible, to recognize that not everybody can fulfill what is needed, but still need this funding to pay for rent and to feed themselves?
Answer.
Mr. Chair? Yes.
Go ahead.
So,
yes, Mr. Watson.
Thank you very much for the question. Obviously, getting information to communities, particularly where there's a challenge with high-speed internet, is sometimes difficult at the best of times. Certainly, one of the things that we sometimes do out of some of our programs, which is to send people into communities to help, is not really an option at this point in time because of the lockdown. But having said that, we're using all the resources available that we have to make sure that people are aware of what resources are available to them, what options are available to them. Another thing that's going on is we're staying in very close touch with the territorial governments in all 3 territories, and I'm sure it's true south of 60 as well, but speaking the context of my Northern Affairs responsibilities, we're engaging very closely with the government of Nunavut, who is very interested, obviously, in the well-being of artists and others who have small businesses, sometimes that they operate less formally.
I'm sorry.
On for what's currently being done, and I think that might be time. So if we could follow up afterwards, that would be absolutely great.
Okay, and also we're having problems once again, Mr. Watson, with the translation. You need to get the microphone very close so that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I
what
do
is your
have
point of order?
I have another meeting I have to attend as well.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if we can wrap this up, and then I can go into that.
Well, we have 2 more speakers, so that's going to be the wrap up. Is the conclusion of the speakers list. And the next speaker is Mr. Baptiste for 6 minutes, and then Madame Berube, and then, I'm sorry?
Point of order, me.
I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry, Marcus. There's too many interventions going on, so I'm losing track of the time and everything else. Plus, I had to evaluate the point of order times for my clock. So Mr. Pawlowski, would you please go ahead?
Oh, no problem. You're doing great, Bob. I see why you're the announcer for the Hamilton Tiger Cats for so many years. You got that melodic voice. Okay, I'm gonna go legal on you really quickly. So I want to cite something from the Indian Act, Section 81(1). The council of a band may make up bylaws not inconsistent with this act, or with any regulations, or made by the governor and council of the minister for any of the following purposes, namely, A, to provide for the health of residents on the reserve and to prevent the spread of contagious and infectious disease, B, the regulation of traffic, C, the observance of law and order. So totally in keeping with this, I know a number of chiefs have tried to take measures to protect the public health. For example, preventing people coming and going on and off the reserve, to try to impose a curfew. But some of them, and this has been brought to my attention by a local chief, that they're having trouble enforcing their bylaws. Certain members of the community are unwilling to do so. They've asked for the help of the police force. I wonder if one of the deputy ministers could clarify, for the sake of these chiefs, who they can go to for assistance in enforcing the bylaws they're entitled to make under the Indian Act.
It's a very good question. If I can try to answer, it is an issue that we're seeing on a daily basis. Those chiefs have the right and they have the authority to pass bylaw to protect their population. They're the ones who make decisions, for example, in case of emergency in general. They decide if when the evacuation is needed and so on. So they have those authorities. They are raising this issue of security on how to enforce it. They use, of course, the First Nation force when they do have actually a police, First Nation police. When they don't, they can use private security. They can use other means. They have been working also with our RCMP. This is where we are now. We're working with them. They can go to our regional office. So on this, the answer is quite clear. They know who we are. They know where we are. They can talk to us, and we are looking with them what are the solutions to that. We're looking at how we can fund and how we can support those measures and the security measures in general that they're trying to put in place to protect their own population. I must say that they've been quite successful, as you know, and I think one of the reasons we have numbers at this stage that are actually low is also because the First Nations took the actions by themselves and by taking the authorities that they had. But it is a growing issue that we're looking at with them on how we can respond to this in a coherent way and also efficient way.
The second question is there any further development on the issue of where if there's an evacuation from any of the more northern fly-in communities in northern Ontario, for example, Saskatchewan seems to get fairly regularly evacuated because of floods. There's been some speculation as to where these communities would go now, given the concern about COVID-19 and a lot of those communities not wanting to come to a place like Thunder Bay because of the risk of coming to a place.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is a constant discussion. Of course, it's not our purpose to change our practice, or at least to change the needs for those evacuation. So those evacuation, when they're needed, will happen. We're working with provinces as we always have done. For example, with the province of Ontario, through emergency departments, and trying to make sure that we have the partners that we need for the evacuation, and trying to make sure that we have also extra measures that are put in place if an evacuation is needed to ensure the safety of the population. The population is worried and concerned, as you mentioned, at going in those communities and maybe contracting the virus. So it is something that we are fully aware and actually working very diligently with the First Nation leaderships as well as with the provinces.
Thank you very much. That's time. And Madame Bérubé, vous avez 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes. Yes? Can you hear me? Go ahead. I'd like to know, the federal government they have more professionals, health professionals for the pandemic, and how many doctors and nurses have been deployed in my riding? Valerie will be the one that will be able to answer your question. I'm not sure she has the information for your riding, but she will tell you about how capacity has been increased for professional services. Valerie, we've implemented emergency contracts that can be used for nursing personnel. It's also in place in Quebec. We also have seeked volunteers. The interpreters cannot interpret due to the quality of the sound. It will start again when possible.
Du Québec. Jusqu'à date, on n'a pas été appelé à utiliser ces ressources-là, mais on a des conversations très régulières avec les communautés. D'ailleurs, ils ont eu un appel aujourd'hui à notre bureau régional avec les partenaires.
We've had regular communications to offer support as needed. It's in place, it's needed, but communities were able, and even the first isolated community that had cases have been able to find extra resources. They've been able to do that through their own network. As you know, in Quebec, First Nations, and in Nunavik, it's completely transferred through the convention agreement. For many decades, First Nations have their own health services.
Merci.
Thank you.
L'autre question.
Here's my other question. Earlier, Minister Miller mentioned that there's a $15 million budget to help Indigenous people outside of reserves. But that's not enough. The Friendship Center Association in Quebec has mentioned that 50 million is very little. I agree with her. Will you increase that amount? The director of the Friendship Center in Val d'Or has also mentioned that the federal government gives too much to the communities. It's not that you don't give too much, it's that you don't give enough to urban Indigenous people. Also, we don't want like different organizations to fight amongst themselves. So what are you going to do for those communities, those friendship centers? For organizations that have more demand, we continue to look into this. They're also eligible for other programs. For example, the program to help with women's shelters. That can also, these places, shelters can also help women living off reserves. Same thing for food. These programs are open for everyone in urban settings, especially for vulnerable people, including Indigenous people. We continue to work with these associations, with provinces and territories, and with cities that are financial partners. They're also serious partners in these situations. It's in their cities, it's in their provinces. We need to have everyone at the table to make sure that all levels of government can contribute. The minister has mentioned that it's not enough. We're trying to see how we can maximize the use of the federal programs, and we will also try to seek opportunities to add measures to answer the needs. It's not an issue of off reserve or on reserve. As you agree, some organizations are pitted against one against the other, and we want that everyone can have access to services and that all partners are part of the conversation. Thank you.
Madame Berube, I'm sorry to say we're at time.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
So thank you for your.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And just before I adjourn the meeting, a couple of bits of business. We would like to have suggestions for witnesses sent into clerks. The meeting will be held on Friday, May the 8th from 2 till 4 p.m. as this one was. And our technical group has advised us that we need to be off of this particular time frame at 4:15, which is upon us now. So with that, I would like to say thank you all. And this meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
What is your point of order?
Just to speak to the time. Some of us have tight schedules all day, and because of a technicality, we just don't have that flexibility to stay on two meetings at the same time. So I appreciate that there is technical issues, but that time frame is something that when it's sent out, it should be understood that is what it's going to be, and the end is going to be a crisp ending as the promised ending, and to have it extended is just unacceptable.
I'm sorry for that, Mr. Zimmer. There's a brave new world going on here, and we're all trying to resolve a lot of issues. So I take your point. We'll try to begin as quickly as possible and end with a proper 2-hour schedule. We were really flying by the seat of our pants today, and we should be much better the next time. But I do appreciate your comment, and I hope that we can start and efficiently run the next meeting as it's scheduled. And I understand your concern. Thanks very much. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.